Number 4, every citizen needs to understand that the founding principle of federalism has been mostly abandoned by our national government in Washington, D.C. The 10th Amendment of the Constitution reads as follows: the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. End of quote. The principle of federalism says that the national government carries out only those functions for which it was given authority in the Constitution. Powers not delegated would be powers not specifically enumerated in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. I count about 24 things that the national government can do. That's it. The president has limited powers as well. Just 11 responsibilities. 6 of them are described in Article 2, Section 2, 4 in Article 2, Section 3, and the power to veto bills passed by Congress is described in Article 1, Section 7. The founders did not set up our government with the expectation that the president would come up with a policy to address every problem. Actually, this is something Teddy Roosevelt wanted to do. He said he wanted an agency for every problem, and we pretty much have that today. Frankly, one of the goals of Roosevelt was to, again, expand the executive branch. And he did some of that, but Woodrow Wilson did a lot of that. So, how is this huge national government in Washington, D.C. working out? It's a model of frugal, responsible government, right? Not on your life. Our government is more wasteful and bloated with unnecessary functions and preoccupations than it has ever been. And it's spending more than $4 trillion every single year. And budgets continue to rise. They have to keep feeding this ever-expanding beast. Limiting and eliminating government regulations can help, but it's only one very small step to freeing us from the administrative state. Entire agencies and functions of the federal government in Washington, D.C. need to be phased out. This can be done in an orderly fashion with transition strategies over a number of years. But hundreds of duties and functions can and should be returned to the states. With respect to legislative powers, nowhere in Article 1, Section 8 does it say Congress can legislate about how parents should educate their children. Nowhere in Article 1, Section 8 does it say that Congress should legislate about health care or health insurance or even security in your old age. These are not functions in the national government. But we have these kinds of things today with national health insurance and Social Security. So Congress went ahead and legislated in areas that they were not authorized to legislate in by the Constitution. They should have all been thrown out of office when they did this. So it's sort of back on us, we the people. We have to decide if we're going to change who's in Congress. Congress has no legitimate authority to legislate about these matters. They all violated their oaths, and we the people did not hold them accountable. So what do we do about it now? Well, we need to elect men and women who will pull the federal government out of these programs. The balance sheet for Social Security in itself shows how foolish it was to entrust with Congress the idea of setting up a Social Security trust fund. The trust fund is broke. The people who receive payments today are receiving it because the next generation that is working is sending their money to Social Security and they're sending it to the current recipients. It's a very irresponsible way to run any kind of a retirement program for anyone, yet we allow the federal government to do this. A real solution for Social Security would be to turn it over to private firms or to state governments. But care should be taken to make sure that current recipients and those who have been promised benefits do receive the benefits they promised. Again, there's a way to figure this out. A transition plan can be put into place, but that's not something Congress seems to care too much about. They're not working on it right now. Another good example of illegitimate activity by Congress and the President is the United States Department of Education. It should be abolished. There are enough smart people in every state of the union to figure out how to educate our children. We don't need central planners in Washington, D.C. to do this. There's no authority given to Congress in the Constitution to legislate about schools at all. It's not there. Any government power in this area should be exercised by states, local governments, or by private entities. But the most important principle is that parents are to be the primary educator of their own children, not the government. These are just two examples of how far we have strayed from the principle of federalism as established by our founding fathers. What I have just described are responsibilities that are not at all federal responsibilities. These are responsibilities of states or local governments, or maybe even the private sector. The federal government has no jurisdiction in these matters as defined in the United States Constitution. There are a few key things the national government should do. Protect our nation from foreign attack. Protect our borders. Conduct foreign policy. Maintain a system of courts and guarantee the free flow of commerce among the states. Congress is also authorized to maintain the necessary military forces to protect our nation and establish rules for the management of these forces. But providing a response to every problem in the nation is not the purpose of the federal government. James Madison, our fourth president and a key author of the Constitution, was also one of the authors of the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers were a series of essays printed in newspapers in New York to assist in getting the Constitution ratified during the ratification process in the state of New York. In one of these, Federalist number 45, James Madison wrote this, quote, "The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite." End of quote. The founders expected most of the work of government to take place at the state and local levels. There were only a few powers they delegated to the national government. Yet, today our national government is involved in almost everything imaginable. We must change this. We must insist that Congress send certain responsibilities back to the states and to state and local governments where they can be handled more efficiently and more effectively. Every citizen needs to understand that this principle of federalism has been abandoned and how it can be restored. We, the people, must demand that our elected officials begin to reverse the mistakes of the past.